The day aliens made first contact with Earth wasn't all that spectacular, despite what the movies had promised. No city-destroying laser beams, no dramatic presidential speeches, and certainly no Will Smith punching extraterrestrials in the face. Instead, humanity received what amounted to a cosmic friend request complete with a digital pamphlet titled, "So You've Just Joined the Galactic Community, a Beginner's Guide." The Galactic Council, a loose confederation of spacefaring species, had been watching Earth for decades. They'd observed our television broadcasts, monitored our internet, and analyzed our biology. Somehow, despite all this surveillance, they'd reached the bewildering conclusion that humans were harmless herbivores with minimal defensive capabilities. This classification became evident during the first official diplomatic meeting at the newly constructed Terran embassy in Geneva. "We're categorized as what now?" asked General Williams, staring incredulously at the holographic display. The alien representative, a tall, gangly creature with 4 arms and skin like polished obsidian, blinked its 3 eyes in rapid succession. "Class 3 non-threatening species," it replied through its translator. "Your biology indicates you are primarily plant consumers with limited predatory instincts. Your dental structure, relatively weak musculature, and notable absence of natural weaponry place you firmly in the harmless category." The room fell silent as the assembled human representatives exchanged bewildered glances. "Did they miss the entire 20th century?" whispered a UN diplomat. "Apparently they've never seen a UFC match," muttered another. General Williams cleared his throat. "While we appreciate your assessment, we believe there may have been some misunderstandings. Perhaps we could assign a liaison to help clarify matters." And that's how Marine Sergeant Jack Reynolds found himself volunteered as humanity's unofficial PR rep to the stars. A decorated veteran with combat experience in 3 different conflict zones and a surprisingly effective diplomatic touch, Jack was deemed the perfect candidate to gently correct the galaxy's misconceptions about human nature. "You want me to what?" Jack asked his commanding officer the next day. "Explain humans to aliens without scaring them, but also without letting them think we're pushovers," the colonel replied, sliding a folder across the desk. "Congratulations on your new assignment as Interspecies Relations Coordinator. Try not to start an intergalactic war." Jack sighed, flipping through his briefing documents. "So they think we're basically space koalas?" "More like space deer with opposable thumbs," the colonel corrected. "Their ambassador seemed genuinely surprised when I mentioned our military. Apparently they thought our weapons were just primitive tools for plant harvesting." "Well," Jack said, closing the folder, "this should be interesting." 3 months later, Jack found himself aboard the Galactic Harmony, the massive space station serving as the Council's headquarters. He'd spent weeks in crash courses on xenobiology, interspecies etiquette, and diplomatic protocols. None of it prepared him for the sensory overload of being surrounded by representatives from over 50 alien species. The diplomatic reception hall resembled a bizarre costume party crossed with a zoo. Floating jellyfish-like beings drifted near the ceiling. Quadrupedal creatures with metallic scales clustered around buffet tables. Small, furry organisms that looked disturbingly like sentient dust bunnies scurried between legs and tentacles carrying message tablets. Sergeant Reynolds chirped his assigned guide, a bird-like being named Kivix whose feathers changed color with its emotions. Currently, they were a pleasant shade of blue. "I've arranged introductions with several influential council members. They're most curious about Earth." Jack nodded, tugging at the collar of his formal uniform. "Lead the way." The evening progressed smoothly enough. Jack fielded the usual questions about human physiology. "No, we can't regrow limbs," culture. "Yes, we really do have over 6,000 languages and technology, actually. We developed nuclear weapons before we mastered space travel, which I'm gathering now was an unusual order of operations." Then came the encounter with the Kreslak delegation. The Kreslak were apex predators from a high-gravity world, stocky, armored humanoids with retractable bone blades in their forearms and a species-wide superiority complex. Their empire controlled 12 star systems and had a reputation for aggressive expansion. "So," rumbled the Kreslak ambassador, looming over Jack, "you are the human military specimen." His translator couldn't quite filter out the condescension in his voice. "Marine Sergeant Jack Reynolds," Jack replied with a practiced smile, extending his hand before remembering that Kreslaks considered touching to be an act of aggression. He awkwardly converted the gesture into a salute. "We have reviewed your species' military capacity," the Kreslak continued, his four nostril slits flaring. "Primitive projectile weapons, rudimentary powered armor, no significant orbital defense grid. Laughable." Jack felt his diplomatic smile straining. "We manage. Your species was wise to accept protected status under the Council. Without our protection, more established species might view your planet as ripe for colonization." The threat wasn't subtle. Jack had been briefed on the Kreslak. Despite Council membership, they frequently pushed boundaries, particularly with newer species. "I'm sure we'd find a way to make visitors feel welcome," Jack replied evenly. The Kreslak made a guttural sound that might have been laughter. "With what? Your Council classification lists humans as having minimal defensive capabilities and non-aggressive tendencies. You lack natural weapons, armor, or significant physical strength." By now, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the Kreslak's increasingly loud mockery. Jack noticed Kivik's feathers had turned an anxious yellow. "Your military tradition is particularly amusing," the Kreslak ambassador continued. "Your troops require extensive artificial protection just to survive basic combat conditions. Our warriors are born ready for battle." Jack felt his patience wearing thin. "Well, we work with what we've got. And we've developed some effective compensatory measures." "Like what? Those primitive explosive devices your kind seems so fond of?" "Like rules of engagement, actually," Jack replied smoothly. "Though some of us just call them the Geneva suggestions when things get dicey." Silence fell across the gathering. The Kreslak ambassador tilted his armored head. "Geneva suggestions?" Jack immediately recognized his mistake. In his irritation, he'd made an inappropriate joke, the kind of dark humor that soldiers used to cope, but that had no place in diplomatic settings. "It's nothing," he backpedaled. "Just a human expression." "Explain this concept," demanded the Kreslak, bone blades partially extending from his forearms in what Jack had learned was a sign of intense interest. "What are these Geneva suggestions that become relevant in combat situations?" Kivix fluttered nervously at Jack's side, feathers now an alarming orange. "Perhaps we should move on to the cultural exchange presentation." "No," interrupted a new voice. A tall, jellyfish-like council elder drifted forward. "I too wish to understand this human concept. Our records indicate nothing of these Geneva suggestions in our study of Earth." Jack swallowed hard. "Well, you see, it's actually the Geneva Conventions. They're, rules we created for warfare." The gathering of aliens stared at him in collective confusion. "Rules for warfare?" repeated the Kreslak ambassador. "Explain." And that's how Jack Reynolds found himself giving an impromptu lecture on war crimes to a room full of increasingly disturbed aliens. "Let me get this straight," said Council Elder Philaxos, her translucent tentacles pulsing with what Jack had learned was the jellyfish equivalent of disbelief. "Your species created rules for how to kill each other." The diplomatic reception had rapidly transformed into an impromptu interspecies conference. Jack now stood at the center of a circle of alien diplomats, all fixated on him with various appendages and sensory organs. Not exactly rules for how to kill, Jack clarified, wishing he'd paid more attention during his international law briefings. More like rules about what you can't do during conflicts. Fascinating, chirped a small, furry diplomat that resembled a sentient chinchilla. And what happens if these rules are broken? Then it's a war crime, Jack explained. The perpetrators can be tried in international courts. This caused a wave of untranslatable exclamations across the gathering. You punish your warriors for their actions during battle? The Kreslak ambassador's bone blades had fully extended now, a sign of extreme agitation or interest. Jack couldn't tell which. If those actions violate agreed upon ethical standards, yes. The council elder's tentacles changed to a deep purple. Sergeant Reynolds, please provide examples of these war crimes. Jack shifted uncomfortably. This was veering into territory he hadn't expected to cover in his first diplomatic function. Well, there's targeting civilians, torture of prisoners, use of certain weapons deemed excessively cruel like chemical or biological agents, depriving civilian populations of necessities. With each example, the alien representatives exhibited their species' equivalent of shock. Some changed colors, others emitted scents, a few simply froze in place. You mean, said a reptilian diplomat slowly, your kind possesses the capacity for these actions, but chooses not to perform them? Even against enemies? That's the idea, yes, Jack replied. Though I won't claim we've always lived up to those standards throughout our history. The Kreslak ambassador had gone unnervingly still. And your soldiers, they voluntarily accept these limitations on their combat effectiveness. We do. Jack straightened his posture slightly. It's part of our training. But why? Asked another alien. If you possess the capacity to defeat an enemy more efficiently through these prohibited methods, why create barriers to victory? Jack considered the question. Because we've learned that how you win matters as much as whether you win. Some victories aren't worth the cost to our humanity. This required several attempts at translation before the gathered aliens seemed to grasp the concept. There's also the practical aspect, Jack continued. If everyone knows certain lines won't be crossed, it makes post-conflict reconciliation possible. Wars eventually end. People need to live together afterward. The council elder drifted closer to Jack. You speak as though your species has significant experience with warfare. We do, Jack admitted quietly, more than we're proud of. Yet your species classification in our database indicates minimal aggressive tendencies, said a data analyst alien, consulting a hovering display. This appears to be a significant classification error. The Kreslak ambassador had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. These rules of yours, they are not signs of weakness. No, Jack replied firmly. They're signs of restraint. There's a difference. In our culture, the Kreslak said slowly, restraint in battle is considered dishonorable, a failure to commit fully to victory. In ours, Jack countered, restraint is what separates soldiers from murderers. The rune fell silent again as the translator relayed this distinction. You referred to these conventions as suggestions earlier, the council elder noted. Was this inaccurate? Jack winced. That was dark humor. Soldiers sometimes joke about serious things. The conventions are binding international law, not suggestions. Yet they have been violated in your history? Yes, Jack acknowledged, which is why we have war crimes tribunals. Actions have consequences, even in war. Especially in war. The Kreslak ambassador's bone blades slowly retracted. Your species possesses biological weapons? We've developed them, Jack admitted. But we've also created international agreements banning their use. You developed weapons and then chose not to use them? The concept seemed to genuinely baffle the Kreslak. We did. Who? And nuclear weapons? Our scans detected significant radiation events in your past. Jack nodded grimly. We used those twice in war. The consequences were so severe that we've spent the decades since creating non-proliferation treaties and maintaining deterrence frameworks specifically to ensure they're never used again. The revelation that humans had developed, used, and then voluntarily restricted planet-destroying weapons seemed to cause the final cognitive break among the gathered aliens. The room erupted in multiple simultaneous conversations, with translator devices struggling to keep up. Jack caught fragments. Complete species reclassification required, potential threat assessment, behavioral anomaly, and most worryingly, predatory restraint mimicry. Kivix, whose feathers had cycled through the entire color spectrum during the conversation, fluttered nervously at Jack's side. I believe, the avian alien whispered, you may have just significantly altered the galactic perception of humanity. Is that good or bad? Jack asked quietly. I'm not entirely sure, Kivix admitted. But I suspect things are about to get considerably more complicated. Jack Reynolds' impromptu explanation of war crimes spawned what human diplomats would later call the Great Galactic Freakout of 2153. Within 48 hours, the Council had convened an emergency classification review, and Earth's diplomatic inbox was flooded with requests for clarification on human military capabilities, ethical frameworks, and psychological assessments. News spread through the galactic information networks at faster than light speeds, aided by increasingly hysterical commentary. Breaking: allegedly harmless humans actually self-regulating apex predators. Humanity's dark secret: they create rules because they need them. In 10 signs you're sharing space with a human, and why that should terrify you. Jack found himself summoned to increasingly high-level meetings, where council representatives peppered him with questions about humanity's capacity for violence and the mechanisms developed to control it. So you're saying, clarified a 12-limbed council historian during one such session, that your species developed rules against targeting medical personnel in battle because you recognized your natural inclination to do exactly that? Not exactly, Jack replied, struggling to explain concepts that humans took for granted. We recognize that without explicit protections, military necessity might override humanitarian concerns. The rules exist to ensure our better nature prevails. But you needed to create the rules in the first place, the historian persisted, which suggests the impulse exists. Jack couldn't argue with that logic. In another meeting, a gelatinous intelligence analyst presented a revised assessment of human capabilities based on historical records they'd finally bothered to examine properly. Your species has engaged in planet-wide conflicts twice within a single century, the analyst noted, its body rippling with what might have been concern. No other council species has survived such a thing. Most civilizations that develop nuclear capabilities destroy themselves before achieving space travel. We came close a few times, Jack admitted. And yet you restrained yourselves. Fascinating. The Kreslak, meanwhile, had moved from mockery to an unsettling level of interest. Their ambassador requested detailed information about human combat techniques, which Earth's diplomats politely declined to provide. By the end of the week, the Council had officially changed humanity's classification from Class 3 non-threatening species to Class 1 regulated predator species. Let's approach with extreme caution. Jack found the new designation on his datapad while having breakfast in his quarters. He nearly choked on his synthetic coffee. This can't be right, he muttered, scrolling through the notification. The attached documentation read, humans demonstrate all markers of apex predatory psychology, territorial instincts, pack bonding, strategic hunting behaviors, combined with uniquely dangerous features. 1. capacity to override biological inhibitions against killing within species. 2. Ability to conceptualize and systematically execute organized violence. 3. Development of artificial force multipliers, weapons that compensate for physical limitations. 4. Metacognitive awareness of their destructive capacity leading to self-imposed regulatory frameworks. Note, the presence of these regulatory frameworks should not be interpreted as indicating reduced threat level. Rather, they suggest recognition of heightened threat capacity requiring control mechanisms. And most alarmingly, all diplomatic personnel are hereby required to complete human interaction safety training before engaging with human representatives. Jack was still processing this information when Kivix burst into his quarters, feathers a frantic purple. "Sergeant Reynolds, have you seen the classification change?" "Just reading it now," Jack replied. "This seems like an overreaction." "It's not just the classification," Kivix chirped anxiously. "You've become something of a celebrity. Your explanation of war crimes has gone viral across the galactic networks." "That can't be good." "It's complicated. Many species find the concept simultaneously horrifying and fascinating." "You've been invited to give lectures at the Council Academy on Human Ethical Constraints in Conflict." Jack groaned. "I'm a Marine, not a professor." "That's precisely why they want you," Kivix explained. "A human warrior who voluntarily follows rules that limit efficient killing. It's revolutionary to many council species." As if the situation weren't surreal enough, Jack began noticing behavioral changes among the aliens he encountered. Council staff maintained greater physical distance. Some species engaged their defensive adaptations when he entered rooms. Scent glands activated, chromatophores shifted to warning colors, or protective membranes deployed over sensitive organs. The Kreslak, on the other hand, had begun showing something resembling respect. Their ambassador actually bowed slightly when passing Jack in corridors, a gesture previously reserved for acknowledged combat equals. "I don't understand," Jack complained to Kivix during an elevator ride to another debriefing. "I didn't say anything that alarming." "You revealed that humans developed ethical constraints specifically because you're dangerous enough to need them," Kivix explained, feathers shifting to a thoughtful blue. "It's like discovering someone keeps a muzzle for their pet because it occasionally eats children." "That's not," Jack began, then sighed. "Fine. But this is getting ridiculous. Yesterday, a Mybari diplomat asked if it was safe to be alone with me in a conference room. The Council has never encountered a species quite like yours before," Kivix said. "Predatory species usually lack your level of self-awareness. Non-predatory species rarely develop your capacity for organized violence. You occupy a uniquely concerning niche." "Great," Jack muttered. "So now everyone's afraid of us because we try not to be monsters." Kivix's feathers rippled thoughtfully. "Not everyone is afraid. Some are intrigued." As if to prove this point, when they exited the elevator, they found a delegation of 7 different species waiting for Jack. Their leader, a tall arthropoid diplomat, stepped forward. "Sergeant Reynolds," it clicked through its translator. "My government wishes to discuss potential defensive alliance protocols with Earth. We find your species' approach to conflict most interesting." Jack glanced at Kivix, who gave the avian equivalent of a shrug. "I'm not authorized to discuss military alliances," Jack began. "This is merely preliminary information gathering," the arthropoid assured him. "For instance, would your Geneva Conventions apply to the treatment of non-human combatants?" And that's how Jack Reynolds, who had only wanted to correct a classification error, found himself accidentally becoming humanity's most influential galactic representative and the subject of what would later be termed the human containment debate. 3 months after the diplomatic incident, Jack had almost adjusted to humanity's new status in the galactic community. Earth had dispatched actual diplomats and military attaches to handle the fallout, allowing Jack to step back into an advisory role. He'd been looking forward to a relatively quiet assignment at the newly established Earth Embassy on the Galactic Harmony Station. Then the Vorkath attacked. The Vorkath were a non-council species from the galactic fringe, four-legged predators with a rigid dominance hierarchy and a philosophy that might be summarized as might makes right. They'd been conducting probing raids against outer council territories for years. This time they targeted humanity's first off-world colony on Proxima Centauri b. Jack was in a meeting with Kivix when the emergency alert came through. The avian diplomat's feathers instantly shifted to alarmed crimson as they both watched the holographic display showing Vorkath ships entering the Proxima Centauri system. "This is bad," Kivix whispered. "The Vorkath specifically target new council species to assess weaknesses." Jack's face hardened as he processed the tactical display. "They're hitting civilian research outposts. Those aren't military targets." An incoming communication flashed on the screen. Earth Command requesting Jack's immediate presence at the Emergency Response Center. As humanity's most experienced off-world military representative, he was being temporarily reactivated as a liaison between Earth forces and Council security. "They're testing us," Jack realized as he hurried down the corridor with Kivix fluttering alongside. "They heard about our reclassification and want to see if it's accurate." The response center was chaos when they arrived, representatives from 12 species coordinating with human military command. The tactical situation was grim. Earth's defense forces were en route but would take hours to arrive. The colony had minimal defenses and roughly 800 civilian researchers and support staff. The Council can dispatch peacekeeping forces, offered a senior security coordinator, but authorization protocols require. "We don't have time for that," Jack interrupted, studying the approaching Vorkath fleet. "Those colonists will be dead or captured before bureaucracy runs its course." A familiar rumbling voice spoke from behind him. "The human is correct." Jack turned to find the Kreslak ambassador, accompanied by what appeared to be Kreslak military officers. "We have a battle cruiser in nearby space," the Kreslak continued. "We offer its services to Earth in this matter." Jack eyed the Kreslak suspiciously. "That's unexpectedly generous." The Kreslak's expression was unreadable behind his armored faceplates. "We are curious to observe human combat protocols in action. Consider it a cultural exchange." Jack understood immediately. The Kreslak wanted to see humans fight to determine if their new respect was warranted. Before he could respond, Earth Command came online. "Sergeant Reynolds, we're authorizing you as acting commander for this operation," announced General Williams. "The Dauntless is still 4 hours out. You're our only military presence in the vicinity." Jack straightened. "Understood, sir." "And Sergeant, remember who we are. The galaxy is watching." The subtext was clear. How humanity responded to this first attack would set the tone for their galactic reputation. Jack turned to the Kreslak ambassador. "We accept your assistance with conditions. Earth forces will coordinate the defense of our colony. Your ship will follow our tactical lead and adhere to Earth's rules of engagement." The Kreslak commanders exchanged glances. "Agreed, but we observe only. We will not handicap our warriors with your constraints." "Fine," Jack replied, "but if your forces violate our protocols, we'll consider it an act of aggression." 2 hours later, Jack found himself aboard the Kreslak cruiser Inevitable Conquest, coordinating an impromptu defensive operation with a species that had been mocking humans just months earlier. The situation had grown more dire. The Vorkath had already landed troops at the main colony complex and taken hostages. "We should bombard their position from orbit," suggested the Kreslak commander, pointing at the tactical display. Maximum casualties, minimal risk. Negative, Jack replied firmly. There are human civilians in that complex. Acceptable losses in warfare, the Kreslak insisted. Not by our standards, Jack countered. We'll deploy ground forces for precision extraction. The Kreslak commander made a guttural sound of disapproval but didn't argue further. Jack outlined his plan, a two-pronged approach with a diversionary attack on the Vorkath ships while a smaller team infiltrated the colony to secure hostages. He would personally lead the ground team, equipped with adaptive armor provided by the Kreslak. Your strategy prioritizes civilian survival over combatant safety, observed a Kreslak officer. This seems inefficient. It's how we operate, Jack replied simply. Now let's go save those people. What followed was humanity's first extraterrestrial combat operation, a chaotic, high-stakes rescue mission that would later be studied in both Earth and Council military academies. Jack's team, consisting of himself and 6 Kreslak warriors who had agreed to follow his commands, infiltrated the colony while Kreslak fighter craft engaged the Vorkath ships in orbit. The Vorkath were formidable opponents larger than humans, with natural armor and vicious fighting techniques. But they had expected minimal resistance from the supposedly harmless humans. The appearance of a human marine leading an elite strike team threw them into confusion. Throughout the operation, Jack maintained strict adherence to Earth's rules of engagement, prioritizing hostage safety, minimizing collateral damage, and even treating wounded Vorkath combatants when they surrendered. Why do you waste resources on enemy wounded? Demanded a Kreslak warrior as Jack applied emergency medical treatment to a captured Vorkath. Because they're no longer combatants, Jack explained, securing a pressure bandage. They're prisoners of war now, entitled to humane treatment. The Kreslak observed this with what might have been bewilderment or newfound respect. Their facial expressions were difficult for humans to interpret. By the time Earth reinforcements arrived, Jack's team had secured the colony and its civilians with minimal losses. The Vorkath fleet had been driven off by the combined Earth-Kreslak forces. In the aftermath, as Jack supervised the treatment of wounded from all 3 species, he found himself approached by both the Kreslak commander and a council observer who had monitored the operation remotely. Your species fights effectively despite your self-imposed limitations, stated the Kreslak commander. It wasn't quite a compliment, but it wasn't mockery either. The council observer, a tall, crystalline being, added, most notably, you maintained your ethical framework even under extreme stress. This validates your species reclassification data. Jack, exhausted and treating a minor wound on his arm, simply nodded. We are what we are. Later, reviewing battle footage with Earth Command, General Williams summed it up. Well, Sergeant, I think we've made our point. The galaxy now knows exactly what kind of species they're dealing with. And what kind is that, sir? Jack asked. The kind that can kick your ass without losing its humanity in the process. 6 months after the Proxima Centauri incident, Jack found himself in yet another ornate council chamber, this time for a formal ceremony. He'd been summoned to receive the newly created Diplomatic Service Cross and Earth honor hastily established to recognize his unique contributions to humanity's galactic standing. I still don't understand why I'm getting a medal, he complained to Kivix as they waited in an antechamber. All I did was explain that humans try not to be complete monsters when we fight each other. Kivix's feathers rippled with amusement, now a comfortable lavender. You fundamentally changed how the Council views not just humans, but the very concept of sapient evolution. Before you, most species believed that ethical constraints were signs of biological non-aggression. You demonstrated they can instead be markers of highly regulated aggression. That doesn't sound medal-worthy. That sounds like I terrified everyone. Fear and respect often travel together, Kivix observed philosophically. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Jack received his medal from the human ambassador, nodded awkwardly through several speeches about interspecies understanding, and tried not to fidget in his dress uniform. The real surprise came afterward, when he was approached by the council elder Philaxos. Sergeant Reynolds, the jellyfish-like being, greeted him. "The council has a proposition for you." "Ma'am?" Jack replied cautiously. "We wish to establish a new diplomatic position, human cultural interpreter. Someone who can help the galactic community understand your species' unique perspective. You would be our first choice." Jack blinked in surprise. "I'm just a Marine, not a diplomat." "Precisely why you would be effective." Philaxos's tentacles pulsed softly. "You represent the aspect of humanity that most concerns other species. If they can understand you, they can understand Earth." Before Jack could respond, he noticed a commotion at the chamber entrance. The Kreslak ambassador was escorting what appeared to be a Vorkath delegation, the first time the fringe species had ever sent representatives to council space. "What are they doing here?" Jack asked quietly. "Requesting provisional council membership and formal diplomatic relations with Earth," Philaxos replied with what might have been amusement. "Your handling of their incursion made quite an impression. A species that fights with honor while rejecting unnecessary cruelty was how they described humans in their petition." Jack stared in disbelief. "They attacked our colony, and you defeated them while treating their wounded and respecting their warriors. For the Vorkath, this apparently warrants great respect." Philaxos's translator couldn't quite convey her tone, but Jack suspected she found the situation as ironically amusing as he did. Over the following weeks, Jack observed a remarkable shift in how various species interacted with humans. The initial fear had evolved into something more complex, a wary respect combined with genuine curiosity. Even the Kreslak had moved from reluctant acknowledgement to something approaching collegial relations. Earth, meanwhile, found itself in the unexpected position of being courted for military alliances by smaller council species seeking protection. Human diplomatic and military personnel were suddenly in high demand as advisors and trainers. "It's ironic," Jack remarked during one of his regular meetings with Kivix. "We're valued for our capacity for violence and our decision not to use it indiscriminately. Your species embodies a paradox that many find reassuring," Kivix replied. "Strength with restraint offers more security than either strength without restraint or restraint without strength." When Jack finally accepted the position of human cultural interpreter, his first official act was to assist in developing the now mandatory Human Interaction Safety Protocols, a document that would be distributed throughout council space. He reviewed the final draft with a mixture of amusement and resignation. Human Interaction Safety Protocols, abridged. 1. Do not make threatening gestures toward human children or companions. Humans exhibit extreme protective responses that override their normal ethical constraints. 2. Do not challenge humans to demonstrate combat capabilities. They will interpret this as either a genuine threat or a challenge to their honor, neither of which ends well. 3. Do respect human personal space, approximately 1 meter radius, unless invited closer. 4. Do remember that human jokes about violence, "I'm going to kill you for that," are rarely literal threats. 5. Do not assume human ethical restrictions indicate inability to take action. Their restraint is voluntary and situational. 6. Emergency procedure. If a human states they are losing patience or not asking again, immediate compliance is strongly advised. 7. Remember, humans classify certain actions as war crimes because they have contemplated performing these actions and chosen not to. This choice deserves respect. For complete protocols, consult your species-specific human interaction manual. Jack showed the document to General Williams during the General's inspection tour of the council station. So we've gone from harmless herbivores to creatures that need warning labels, Williams observed with a chuckle. Progress, I suppose. It's better than being underestimated, Jack replied. And it keeps everyone on their best behavior. Including us, the general noted. The council's watching how we handle ourselves now. Jack nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Our history shows we could use some external accountability. As they walked through the station's grand observation deck, they passed representatives from dozens of species, many of whom acknowledged Jack with their cultural equivalents of respectful greetings. Near the massive viewport showing Earth in the distance, they encountered the Kreslak ambassador with a group of Kreslak military cadets. "Ah, Sergeant Reynolds," the ambassador rumbled. "I was just explaining to our future warriors about human combat philosophy." "Were you now?" Jack replied, raising an eyebrow. "Indeed, I was telling them that humans believe the strongest warriors are those who know when not to use their strength." The Kreslak made a formal gesture of respect, a concept our species is considering. As Jack and the general continued their tour, Williams shook his head in amazement. "You know, Reynolds, when we made first contact, I was worried the galaxy would think we were pushovers or monsters. Never imagined they'd see us as both scary and ethical." Jack smiled slightly. "Just needed to read the fine print, sir. Humanity comes with warning labels for a reason." Behind them, a new batch of alien diplomats arrived at the station, each clutching their freshly issued human interaction manuals and scanning the crowd nervously for their first glimpse of the galaxy's most paradoxical predators, the strange creatures who had needed to invent the concept of war crimes precisely because they were capable of committing them.